Welcome to Dot Social, the first podcast to explore the world of decentralized social media. Each episode, host Mike McCue talks to a leader in this movement, someone who sees the Fediverse's tremendous potential and understands that this could be the internet's next wave. Today, Mike's talking to Blacksky founder Rudy Fraser, a technologist, organizer, and fellow at Harvard University's Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Study. Fraser launched Blacksky in 2023 as a response to the challenges faced by Black users on traditional social platforms. Inspired by mutual aid systems and philosophies, Fraser and his team don't just strive to create a safe, welcoming space for their community. They want to create a blueprint for how other mid-sized groups can build and sustain themselves in the internet's next era. We hope you enjoy this conversation.
Rudy Fraser, welcome to Dot Social. It is so exciting to talk to you.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
And welcome back from the Atmosphere conference. I wasn't able to be there, but some of my team was, and they raved about it. And I got a chance to watch the talk that you gave there. And it was, I think, one of the most insightful talks I've heard so far about the future of the social web and community building and the work you're doing, and how you communicated it at Atmosphere. I thought was amazing.
Yeah, thank you. And I was really trying to cause some trouble. I think it didn't come across as as rebellious in the end as I wanted it to be, but I think it was good. I think people took inspiration from it. I essentially my talk was titled Beyond Horseless Carriages, Building Community in the Decentralized Era, because I think AT Protocol poses a good opportunity for building on what I call kind of internet forum size communities, subreddit size, the 1 to 2 million sized of user base, which is where Blacksky is right now. The feed has been used by over 1.5 million folks, and Bluesky, they're paving the way for 1 billion people on the network, like a Facebook-sized social network. And I think the Fediverse was very focused on, a couple hundreds, thousands of folks. But this space of a few million is I think there's lots to explore there. And so I wanted to be like, hey, y'all, you can do things besides just, build like web, I almost said web 2. You can do things besides build like a TikTok alternative, which the TikTok alternatives are great, but I want to see more than that, just those things being pursued. I want the weird old internet back. And I think you can do that on AT Protocol.
The whole concept of the horseless carriage, I thought, was a very apt, thing to raise to all the developers in the room. We do have this sort of copying. It's a clone of X, a clone of whatever, just with new technology. And while there's a lot of really cool things about that, it doesn't really enable anything fundamentally new until we start actually building that stuff. And that was what I was really excited about when you were talking, is that you're thinking about, okay, well, what do we build after the horseless carriage? What do we do with all this new technology? And one of the and I'm really excited to get into that and talk a little bit about also your blog post on how, the internet really should be a collection of many autonomous communities. I thought that was also a fantastic blog post. And by the way, I'll say for, people listening, if you want to understand the future of the social web, this is a must-read blog post and a must-watch talk. We'll have the links in the show notes here. Really, really insightful stuff. Before we get into that, though, I wanted to try to get a little bit more of insight from you in terms of how you're thinking about this philosophically. You talk about the work you're doing on mutual aid groups and thinking about mutual aid. Could you explain that a little bit more for people who aren't familiar with it?
The way I even got started in kind of all this stuff is I spent about 10 years in the enterprise tech IT kind of space, and the company I was at they had exited, and so I had a bit of some runway, and I was like, I'm going to go out and do the startup founder thing, was what I always wanted to do. And in doing so, I felt like I tried the traditional, like, startup advice kind of stuff, and it didn't feel right for me. And I felt like I kind of took the approach of, if most startups fail, most of this stuff fails, then I might as well fail in a way that feels good, in the way that, I enjoy the ride. And so I was like, well, what feels most fulfilling to me? And that was always, it always kind of came back to community. And so one of the first ideas I pursued was like, I came into leadership in tech during the George Floyd uprisings. And I was doing all hands presentations and managing folks. And then I was going out right after and protesting. And while I was protesting, I was seeing these community fridges pop up. And these were initiatives, like a fridge you can just walk up to. It'll be outside of like a deli or a clothing store, and then you could just take anything from it, or you can leave. You can drop off food, or you can take food from it. It had this whole ethos of, share what you can, take what you need. And I was like, those are super cool. How come they don't? It's been a couple years now, post 2020, how come those aren't everywhere? And that led me to learning about, okay, who are the folks who are setting up these community fridges? What are the challenges with them? They must have had some kind of challenge if they didn't end up, scaling, right? And so what was the philosophy behind those? And that's how I learned about mutual aid and these mutual aid organizations. And it was really interesting to me because, I was trying to find my space in that because it really spoke to me. And I found that these groups were really cool. They were horizontal, voluntary organizations, non-hierarchical. And they also had some of them, the ones that got pretty big, there were these groups, these informal groups, right, that formed around trying to get food to neighbors, like deliver food to folks who were immunocompromised during the peak of the COVID pandemic, and they were delivering groceries to folks, and they were doing like hundreds of these deliveries. And so they were getting tons of donations. They were getting hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then you had this like volunteer group of people who were going out and delivering food to folks. And they had to have systems to organize this on. They were using Open Collective to collect the funds and do approvals. They were using Signal group chats. They were, or Slack or Discord for communication. Some of them they were using Airtable to gather resources to sign up folks. Like you're a family of 3, you need this, you need that. And then building automations into Airtable. They had GitHub repos with some of the automations that they had built. So I thought all of this was really fascinating. And that's how I ended up joining a local mutual aid group called We the People NYC. And I just kept finding as I was getting deeper into all this, that the ethos behind it really spoke to me. And especially I think some people come to mutual aid from a political ideology standpoint. There's some kind of European anarchism kind of philosophy. But for me, it felt a lot like how I grew up. I'm born and raised New Yorker, but I'm first generation American. My family is from Guyana in South America. And I always heard about my family's cultural practices like susus are a thing that folks do, where you have a group of friends, you all pool money together, and then one person gets that pile of money as like a windfall, and then you could use that to invest. And so all these kind of communal practices, and just how, for me, growing up in New York, we faced food insecurity, housing insecurity, and I really felt like my neighborhood took care of me. And so this being able to see that from an early age, how communities can really coalesce around any problem, I feel like, and start to figure it out and take care of each other. I was like, how can I put my spin on this? How can I bring my, there's this writer, Ruha Benjamin. She has, in one of her works, I feel like she talks about anyone can participate in movement work. You just find your plot of land and you work your plot. And I feel like technology is my plot. And so I was like, I'm going to try to get in where I fit in this. And so I draw lots of parallels in in how mutual aid organizations work to open source, and how like a social media group like Blacksky can kind of build. So that's kind of where a lot of that philosophy kind of came from.
Yeah, the concept of at Proto and decentralized social media effectively enables the communities themselves to be in charge of the platform that they're on. Right? That's the vision, and that's the thing that I think has been really amazing to see what you've done. You've effectively, leveraged with at Proto. You've built effectively a sort of, I guess, kind of Twitter-esque community, but that's, which can be viewed in Bluesky. But it's really owned by and powered by you and your team, and the, sort of influenced by that community, which we, obviously we've never had that before, right? It's, it used to be, you'd had to lobby Twitter or X to go, make some change or handle, they just created, models that basically were the same for everyone. And they really were not community specific. And I think that's the thing that has been really pretty amazing to see what you've done with Blacksky.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the way and so what's been really interesting to me is that App Protocol is a decentralized protocol, and the way that I frame it for folks who are unfamiliar is that App Protocol unbundles social media so that each part of it can be ran by a different organization. So the company that holds your data and is what you use when you log in, that's one company. The app that you downloaded on your phone, that's another company. The feed that you're scrolling and the feeds that you can switch to are different companies. And then if you encounter some harmful content, you want to report it, you can choose which company you report that to as your moderator. And so with Blacksky, a lot of what we've built is building a lot of that from scratch, or owning and hosting different parts of that. So we built our own personal data server. We started with a custom feed. We run a moderation service with a 8-person volunteer mod team that are also compensated. And we're building our own relay. We're building all this infrastructure. And I find what's really cool with Blacksky as a community that is different from the average Bluesky user is that folks understand implicitly the decentralized nature of App Protocol as a Blacksky user. And they pitch it. I even heard today from someone, I was speaking to someone from Free Our Feeds, and they were like, oh, this person was like, they're a community member of Blacksky. They contribute money, they support it, they understand it, they explain the moderation, the feed, And I was like, I don't even know who this person is. I probably should, as they are paying and supporting us. But yeah, but there's 100 stories of that. There's, in that blog post at the very end, I include one of my favorite threads of someone unprompted, like I didn't ask them. They tagged me in the post, but they were explaining to folks that Blacksky is like an app within an app. And so like folks implicitly understand that Blacksky could not exist in a centralized app. And so it's decentralization. It's like for Blacksky, we don't have to pitch anyone on decentralization, because they just know that there would never be a place, there was no other app that would ever do something like this, would allow a Black community to own their own infrastructure and like set their own moderation rules and do whatever they want. So that's super powerful to me, that like people just implicitly getting the value of and the benefit of building on a decentralized protocol.
Yeah. Sometimes when there's these new protocols that come along or new standards, people say, well, what's the killer app, right? What's the thing that's going to make all of this, new technology popularized, right? What I think is so powerful about what you've really tapped into is that it's not about the killer app anymore. It's about the great communities that people can join. Those are what are enabled by this protocol. And in fact, you can experience this community and participate in this community from a number of different apps, right? It doesn't matter. And that is the thing that is, I just think when you look at, with your blog post about, how you see the social web really as a collection of, all these different autonomous communities, even loosely organized, right? And sort of porous, so people can sort of explore other communities. They don't have to just lock in, just use one app just for this community, right? I think those insights that you are having as you've been building this community and building the technology to support it are really, it's what's so exciting to me is that is the first time I can say I've seen somebody actually thinking past the horseless carriage, actually thinking into really where the future is going here, and building it. When you look at the work you're doing for enabling these communities, or I guess do you think of Blacksky as one community, or do you have now sort of sub communities within Blacksky?
There are sub communities for sure. So there's like a Blacksky travel, a Blacksky like gardening. People have reached out. There's Black Med Sky, Black EDU Sky, Black Academics, and so we host those feeds as well under us. And folks reach out every now and then for doing additional feeds. One of the interesting ones that is kind of TBD is like if Spark or Skylight pop off, will it be Black Spark? Or will it still just be Blacksky? I'm leaning towards just keeping it Blacksky, because that was kind of the whole point to me, is like you keep the community across the different apps.
Yeah, and the Blacksky video feed is fantastic, right? There you go, right? That is, the fact that we've been building communities based on media type, is crazy when you really think about it, right?
Yeah, you're the same person. You probably know this. I mean, maybe it's different only in that maybe this person started, maybe they're younger and they weren't on Twitter as much and they didn't build a following on Twitter, but they built it over here. Maybe there's that distinction, but ultimately, like, there's really no separation. And it sucks to even tie your community and identity to a corporate entity, right? Yeah. Exactly.
Communities have been fragmented and held back by the fact that they've had to organize around a particular media type or a particular app or a particular platform. This is one of the first times I've seen where it's really independent of those things. Mm-hmm. And leveraging the strength of those things too, right? Particularly from a moderation point of view. So when you think, one of the thoughts you have in your blog post is this concept of these sort of dotted line communities. In other words, you don't necessarily post directly into Blacksky. Like, it's not like a Facebook group in that sense, right? Or it's not really like a subreddit. But I heard you say you kind of know when you're posting that it's going to show up in Blacksky on that feed. Explain a little bit more about how you see these communities being these sort of dotted line communities.
Yeah, I think the dotted line community is important. I think both are important, actually. I think the whole like dark social, the social networking that happens, the relationships that build that are not necessarily public and like, they're not like, marketers can't find them, like a Discord or a private Facebook group or a group chat. I think those are important. I think I actually have found that Blacksky, often one of the top 2 requests is that kind of space for Blacksky. And so that's something that we're actively working on. It's a project called Cypher, and you'll still log in with your Bluesky identity, this goes into the value of the portable identity. You just use OAuth, and then you'll be able to make the public post from this other app, but then you'll also make posts that are only visible to other people in your community. So in this case, other folks who are in Blacksky, because I do think the private spaces are important in addition. And then I think the public spaces are valuable as well, because I explained that I kind of view like custom feeds like a magazine, and that and the other important thing, I guess, too, is that like not all of your posts will end up on the Blacksky feed, because there is stuff that we automatically remove, and we do kind of do some automated curation and filtering, and then what shows up on the chronological feed may be different than what shows up on the trending feed. So you're never necessarily guaranteed, but you do know that you have an awareness that you are a part of this community. I mentioned in the blog post that I want to be able to give people like badges and kind of a community, some kind of community validation, so that you're not just, I want to get beyond you use a hashtag. I want to get us beyond hashtags. I want to get to, we're now at custom feeds and servers that we own, and then I want like ways to display that so that you can really feel like you can kind of wave the Blacksky flag. Because some folks put it in their bio, they put it in their handles. They say they're the governor of Blacksky. They say they're the one person. She does daily, I think her name is Naj. She does daily kind of question answer posts that folks respond to in the quote posts. And that's very specific to Blacksky. I don't see anyone else on the app doing that. And she she calls herself, her display name is Nye, the foremother of Blacksky. So I think like I want people to be able to keep engaging with the community and feel like they own a part of it themselves. And I think there's cool, interesting ways that the protocol allows for us to do that. And then I think about like being a part of multiple communities. So being a part of like Blacksky and Northsky. Northsky is kind of finding and taking inspiration from what we did with Blacksky, and they're doing it for the LGBTQ IA plus community. And I think that's really cool. And so you can be, and I think you should be able to be a part of multiple communities, represent both all, and participate in the ones that you want to. So that's some of the stuff that I think I'm seeing.
And is there an explicit way to join the community?
With Blacksky, it's using the hashtag @Blacksky. Hashtag, yeah.
To add your account, to add your profile, and then you decide whether you're going to enable that person to join the community, or are they automatically added?
They're automatically added. And so we want people to feel free. I didn't want to get to the point where I'm like policing Blackness. And so people, but the community is very vigilant. So I wouldn't recommend anyone, to try and just like, we catch all that stuff right away. And if it looks like abuse, we built ways to ban people from viewing the feed, right? So there have been harassers who like try to use the hashtag, they join and then they try to spew hateful messages. We have automated filtering that, you won't even, if you use like the hard R slur, like it won't appear in the feed. But then if we retroactively, like this is where the content moderation and the custom feeds come into play, because we also run a mod service, and a lot of the folks who use the custom feed, they also use the moderation service. To the point where some folks, they only interact with like Blacksky and they refer to the app as Blacksky. And that's why it comes. So I think it's a good opportunity to then create a Blacksky app. But yeah, so if there are infiltrators on the feed, then people will report it to the Blacksky moderation service, and we have our own kind of custom workflows in the back end where we have a specific queue and a specific alert if content is reported and it's showing on the Blacksky feed, because that's a bit more urgent. It's getting amplified to all the people viewing the feed. So, I get on those right away. I get to those quicker, for example, than if it's just somewhere else on the Bluesky app where hate is reported.
Yeah. So what have you learned as you've been in the middle of all of this? You've been thinking about, okay, where should @Proto go? Where should moderation go? How should we be thinking about these community models, on the social web? What are some of your top learnings there that you're excited about pursuing?
Some of the top learnings I feel like that we're pursuing, I think the private spaces and building beyond the Bluesky app. And that's something that I'm really interested in, because I find more and more that Bluesky's corporate interests are maybe just naturally diverging from the communities and ecosystems interests. And that's just the way it's going to be. I think we had a lot of conversations over Atmosphere conference about some of those things. Like, will Bluesky be the browser for AT Protocol, where we'll all just build our lexicons and Bluesky will be the distribution mechanism for it? And so, because there is still an adoption problem, like I don't know that the switching problem has been solved yet necessarily. Like, can you, AT Protocol has 35 million users. Can you spin up a new app and get like 10 million of those users overnight. I don't know that that has necessarily been solved yet. And so for me, I view it as like, that's not even necessarily my concern. I'm more like interested in like, will Blacksky, the community, come over to the next thing that we build? And I think that is true. And so, yeah, we're looking to build out that kind of private space and build out the features that we don't think Bluesky will build out. So like the community badges or like, there's some cool stuff that folks have built around more democratic forms of governance around moderation that has been really cool. So Natalie Davis built this tool called SafeSkies for us. And so right now I'm the only one that could take stuff off of the feed. And so I want to make that, because that's not necessarily like moderation governance. Like when Bluesky designed moderation, they were more thinking of like content that gets reported to you. And we've flipped that on its head in a couple ways. One, I view moderation also as like curating the content that gets shown to folks. And so SafeSkies allows me to promote certain people to moderation roles where they can remove content from the feed. And that's only made possible because of the custom stuff we've built for how our feed works. And then we, on the other piece too is like we do automated reporting. So like anytime a slur is used, like anywhere on the app, we can respond to that. So there's kind of those tools, right, that we're building. SafeSkies, the auto reporter, Cypher is the name. And so we're also wanting to like bring that to other groups and other communities. So I think that's the other avenue that we're kind of exploring. So like Blacksky's business model, we are supported via Open Collective from our own community. It'll be interesting. I think Bluesky is talking about building in DID-to-DID payments, like a kind of payment rails for AT Protocol. We'll see how that kind of lands, especially if they end up trying to take a cut on those transactions. We'll see how that goes. But this kind of suite of tools that we're providing could be used by other communities. So we've had folks approach Blacksky to use, help them set up labelers, help them set up moderation services. Ultimately, like a big thing is that the problem with the decentralized web is, decentralization is great and it can create these like cool mechanisms like being able to have your own community. But the person who's a community builder is not necessarily the same person who can set up a server and like configure environment variables and, do the whole deployment process. And so, I think there's an opportunity there for just making that easier for people. And so that's a role that we've kind of stepped in certain capacities. So hosting services for folks, whether that's, maybe it's we're in conversations with some researchers about building auto reporting services that can detect health misinformation content and then kind of like feeding that into a service where they could then reach out to folks to do certain interventions. Or it's like a certain campaign for a foundation. People have started using labelers as badges because, they don't have a badge mechanism, but you could do a labeler that's like, I have like a pronoun labeler. So, or it's not my labeler, but I subscribe to the pronouns labeler and I hit like on a post that said, like this post if you want to get the he, him label on your profile. And now on all my posts that shows up. So we did something for a group called Shot Foundation for their public school grad labeler, for example. So doing stuff like that, I think is really cool and really fun. And so organizations with their own, whatever their interests are, adopting some of these tools to help further whatever their goals, I think that's another cool and interesting opportunity. And then, lastly, I guess it is around like, it's these new experiences that folks can hopefully end up building. I think I'm a big, like in that same blog that I use, if you scroll to the end, you can see a bunch of replies from folks, but those aren't comments on the post. Those are replies to a Bluesky thread that looks like comments on the blog post. And so I want to see more of that kind of exploration.
Yeah, with all this technology, it's easy to lose sight of some of the really powerful kind of first principles that can now be applied to communities, right? And one of the first principles is you got to care about the people who are in the community. You need to know who they are and trust that, you build relationships with those people over time. maybe even across communities. And this idea of a did, an actual identity that you care about as somebody who is posting, within these communities, you're going to care about your reputation more. You're going to care about other people. You're going to treat them, I think, with more respect over time as people build these identities and they realize these aren't just like, it's not just another handle on just another app with, it's like, this is your identity on the social web.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that? Is that something that you feel like is happening yet, or
is it happening yet? I think there's more to do on that front. I think once people start to do like the login to other apps with like, I think that's what's been cool about seeing like Skylight take off, and because that's just the one I've used, and like you log in with Bluesky. I think it needs to be rebranded a little bit, so it's not logging with Bluesky. It's maybe login with Atmosphere or App Protocol or something to make it more generic. And then maybe the PDS starts to feel like more like a home, not a home server, but just more separate, like pulling it out a little bit more from Bluesky, I think will help people feel like, okay, this is an identity that I control. When you tie the domains to it, I think that also helps a little bit with that. So there's a little bit more, and I've already started thinking about it from this angle of like, I don't know if I think what'll be interesting is like, what is an anti-pattern and what is maybe a good thing? Like reputation scores could be good or bad, depending on how they're implemented. And how they kind of feed into content moderation or feed rankings and things like that. But it is possible, to your point, because it is like a likely going to be a stable identity that someone has, and you do it, and it's done without the Facebook way of like, hey, you have to upload your ID. You could still be like anonymous, but like well known for like your internet persona, and I think that's really cool.
A lot of the infrastructure that you're building is designed to give people with those identities more agency.
That goes into like us building our custom personal data server, our own relay. We basically, the story behind that is just wanting to, there's all these people, even for the funders that I pitched this on, is that there's all these people who have now identified as being a part of Blacksky. I would really hate for, after people made all these TikToks saying that they're like come to Blacksky or part of Blacksky, people like went on like CNN saying like Blacksky is this cool thing. People made a custom logo for us for Black History Month. I didn't ask anyone to do that. They just did it. And so like, I would hate for after everyone did all this work and like really labor, like kind of cultural labor and putting their names and reputations online behind something, and they probably didn't even know who I was when they were doing that. I don't want that to be taken away by some corporation. I don't even want Blacksky failing. I view Blacksky as a threat, like Blacksky algorithms as a threat to Blacksky, the community. And so as I build things, I want it to be, I think of both of those failure modes in mind, that I really do want the community to outlive either these corporations. And so the infrastructure we're building is so that if Bluesky goes away, it doesn't even affect us because we're already building all our own stuff anyways. And hopefully, even if I go away or Blacksky goes away, there's all these people who are a part of the process in creating it, because we never did anything closed source. It was always open from the start, and we never really, anyone who wants to contribute can contribute. There's a community and ecosystem that would keep it going.
Not only, I think, will that happen in terms of the infrastructure that you're building, but also the ideas that you're putting out there, right? I think it seems to me like you're already influencing some of the roadmap and thinking at Bluesky. And I think for a lot of other product developers, certainly I can speak for myself, like, a lot of the things that you're doing are very, I think, very prescient for the future of how these products should work. So, yeah, man, you're charting the future. You really are. I think that when people start to realize it's about the communities, it's not about the apps, it's not about the protocol, it's not about the platform, it's about the communities, and how healthy those communities are, how safe people feel in those communities, how effective are those communities and what they're trying to do. Are the tools and capabilities there to enable things like mutual aid to happen, from an architectural point of view. And as you establish that, I think, not only are you building something that's going to be lasting from an infrastructure point of view, but also from a, how people think of things point of view.
Yeah, I've been telling folks that like my worst fear after all, not my worst fear, but a fear I have is that after all this, it's just like a little Wikipedia entry for Blacksky. Thing that has made an impact and made a difference in folks' lives, and again, like all the stuff I said before, like it can keep going beyond what we got going. And yeah, I also it feels good to. It feels really good to be able to put some of these ideals like into practice, right? Like it's not just kind of one of my own like personal principles is kind of like show don't tell, and so all the things that I believe I hope also come through in the stuff that we build. And I've heard that from folks that like people kind of jive with Blacksky and they get a certain vibe from the brand, I guess, from the community, from everything, all the stuff that I believe comes through in the work. And so, yeah, I hope it's like, it's not just a superficial, like veneer in some of the like open source or mutualistic principles. It's also like built into the way that we work.
There's a lot of community builders out there and there's a lot of developers out there. There's not very many people who do both. So that's, I think, something that I find really inspiring about, the work you're doing, because you're able to learn by doing and then actually build to, address the things that you've learned.
Another reason why I'm also kind of hopeful for other folks to kind of, I guess, just like adopt this kind of like way of thinking is we also face challenges that I don't think I know no one else faces, because I'm the only one that like faces it, and I don't see other people talk about the similar challenges. One of those that I'm curious of how it kind of plays out is, and I'll give the specific example of where it can be a problem, but in like issues between communities. So like if we have, let's say there's another dominant community on the platform that kind of follows the same ways that Blacksky does. We saw early on that there were sometimes like kind of Blacksky kind of started in conflict with other users on the Bluesky app, and that's where like safety features kind of started getting built from the very beginning. Like we built our own block list called the green list, the ban from TV feature to stop from being able to view the feed. All that kind of came very early because we faced harassment very early. I think it would be interesting if there are like other communities, and then how those communities interact with each other. Could be interesting. You could kind of see this happening if like the fandom community starts up, and then there's like issues between those two, and how you kind of handle, how you just handle the diplomacy between those two. A lot of that stuff kind of happens off protocol, and it's I think it's not really a technical thing. It's just more like how it speaks to the health of the broader platform. And to get really even specific of like and the example I was going to give there is like block lists. So I think Bluesky actually addressed this today, of block lists being used as harassment vectors. They were similar to what we have with the green list. Other folks were doing similar block lists, and they're being like, we're blocking transphobic people or bigots of some kind. And then you find that like they would maybe have like half of Blacksky on there at a certain time, when maybe you could have half of Blacksky on a block list. So I think stuff like that will be interesting. It's like how the features that people roll out in the protocol, how they could maybe the anti-patterns, and how different communities relate to each other. And then there's intra-community stuff that we also deal with and figure out the tools for.
One of the things you talk about is the importance of trusting people, right? Giving giving people trust is a lot easier than sort of a trustless world, right? And sort of designing around not trusting anyone.
Right.
Designing systems around trusting people is seems like an incredibly important thing to be thinking through.
Yeah, I really did like Dan Holmgren's reference to lazy trust in his presentation, which was basically saying like the human has to trust their PDS and has to trust the app that those services are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and the only trustless relationship is between the computers. Like the computers don't have to trust each other. That's cool, but the human does have to trust those services. And then it's lazy trust because like you trust it, and then if it violates your trust, then you have the freedom to move your data to another service, and it doesn't impact your experience. And so that is really what I like. And there's actually this New Yorker article that came out that I kind of disagree with parts of the language of how it did this, where it kind of framed that Bluesky doesn't have to police free speech because services like Blacksky would do it. And I don't like police being referenced anywhere near or my work, but it's also not necessarily policing free speech because you still have freedom of speech. You just don't have freedom of reach. And so the listener gets to choose what service, how they receive that content. And that's done through the custom feeds, and that's done through the moderation services. And even if someone is trusting Blacksky with that moderation, they have the option of choosing, like, do they ignore the labels we apply? Like they could, maybe you automatically hide anything we label as anti-Black, but you show a warning label for misogynoir. The user still has a choice there. And it is lazy trust. And then if they don't like our moderation, if they disagree with most of it, then they can just stop using our moderation, right? Sometimes there's been folks who are like non-Blacksky users who use our moderation service, and they're like, why did you label such and such content? I'm like, but you're not necessarily our intended audience. Like, you don't see the harm here because you're not the one who would be harmed. And so but that person has the freedom to, like, if you keep disagreeing with us, then you can just not use our service. So I think that's the kind of, like, I really like that lazy trust model where you can trust us up until the point where you don't want to anymore, and then you're not locked in. You can migrate.
This point that you mentioned earlier around how do we enable these different kinds of communities that are moderated in different ways to not just wall themselves off. I mean, so if that's what they want to do, that of course is their choice. They can do that. But there's also a lot of value in these communities being able to, engage with each other. And they may have different moderation standards from one community to another community, right? But you still want to enable the ability for people to communicate, right? And so that's a fascinating problem to try to solve.
The other number two behind private spaces complaint that we get from Blacksky users is that there's too much sexual content in the feed after a certain time. And one of the ways I've tried to address that is listening to, so there's the fire hose that people know about, that, like, that's where all the posts and follows and stuff come from, and that's how you can build a custom feed. Each moderation service has their own fire hose as well. So we started listening to the Bluesky fire hose, and anything that they label as sexual content, because they use AI for that, we'll store that label in our database. And then when you're viewing the Blacksky feed, anything that was labeled as sexual by Bluesky, we just won't show. And so you can kind of expand that to, like, any other community. So if you want to remove anti-Black content, you could subscribe to the Blacksky moderation service. And so it also enables this kind of coordination behind communities. And then that plays into the feeds that you build, all this stuff. So I think there's really cool possibilities. So another way that we're trying to help with that is, like, we're trying to build a moderation relay where you can just go to, it's Blacksky's relay website, subscribe to that. And that's going to spit out all the moderation labels from the entire network to make that really easy for people to do. But yeah, I think there's all this, like, cool protocol level stuff that enables collaboration and coordination between communities and really enables more user agency. Like, I do like that phrase, giving giving people more agency.
In your blog post, you had what looked like, I don't know if this was a mock-up that you did or this is actually something that's being built into SafeSkies, but the ability, for example, to say anyone can reply or just my followers can, the people I follow can reply, or just people on Blacksky could reply to a post. I thought that was a very interesting idea.
Yeah, I would. So this goes back into the like Bluesky as a browser or Bluesky as the microblogging site, because there are features that I would like to see built that better capitalize on some of these other things. Like, you already have reply gates, you already have moderation services. It would be cool if you could bring them together, because then maybe I don't need to build like the local only posting app. If you could make it so that just within the Bluesky app, you can say, hey, this mod service is what I'm delegating to control who can reply to this. And then we can programmatically build stuff. I think you can also do interesting things where like that could allow for more creativity. Like you could build something that, you could build something for Lizzo or like celebrities where only people with a certain, maybe you don't use reputation score, but you're like, you find some way to filter out trolls. And so they by default, now they have a troll-free interaction experience. I think delegated moderation is an idea I'd like to see explored. It is possible. So it's possible you then go like you can build this on a different app, but it would be cool if like Bluesky is already kind of functioning as this distribution mechanism to get you in front of millions of users. If they just had that component in there. So delegated moderation is a cool one. The badges, the community verification is one that I would like to see. I don't believe it's going to happen, but I think that's where we might end up doing that on our own separately, because that one's easy enough. But yeah, I would like delegated moderation as a feature. I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, it seems like what you're starting to, talk about are some kind of best practices for if you're building a client, you should build these capabilities in, right? To benefit from all of the decentralized moderation that's happening out there on Bluesky. And if you're running a PDS, here are some, best practices and so on, right? There's like, as we start to think about, like, we're not just building Twitter clones, we're building apps that are really designed to enable people to participate and engage with communities in different ways and different lenses, but they don't want to lose all their moderation in the process. That's very, very important new phase that we're in.
And for folks building apps, I think there's a kind of there's a hesitancy to do moderation. And I think part of my pitch also in my talk was that there are weird people like me who, like, for a certain community, they are willing to do the moderation for. And so, if you maybe, you still need to do some platform moderation, don't get me wrong. But like if you enable the features that allow communities to moderate themselves, you do kind of a little bit of maybe what that New York article is getting at, is that you get a little bit of a cop out where like you don't have to do moderation for everybody. You allow people to do moderation for themselves, but those features do have to. Yeah.
Increasingly, I think if you're building an app here, you really do need to embrace this composable moderation work. I mean, it's really hard to, if you've got an identity and you're, just looking at the world of the social web through a different app, all of the other elements that you expect to be there around moderation should really travel with you, right? Otherwise, it's going to make it a lot harder to adopt other apps, right? If you have to start from scratch on moderation and now you're not safe at all using this app, right? That's a big issue.
Yeah, I think there's lots of conversation and debate around like what carries over right now. I think because we're all still in the very early phases of building stuff. So like one conversation I saw today was like, should new apps like keep the Bluesky follows? Should your follows from Bluesky be like, if I have 32,000 followers on Bluesky, should I have 32,000 followers on Skylight or Spark? And some people are like, well, maybe I don't want to have the same audience from the other app on this app. But then if you're a creator and you're a certain type of personality, then maybe you do want to have like your audience translate to another app or another medium. I think a lot about like sensible, practical defaults. which is why I even wanted, we have starter packs on Bluesky. I was like, maybe starter packs should also come with labelers. So like if you signed up using the Blacksky starter pack, because I can see who signed up with it. If you signed up and then you followed all the people and then you subscribe to the Blacksky feeds, maybe you should also have the labeler in there. So you can also by default, when you sign up, you get the labeler, the feed, the community of people you followed. But yeah, better sensible defaults across new apps, I think that's something we have to figure out as a community.
And I know you're supporting all this work right now with Open Collective. Is that the primary fundraising model that you've been using?
I got approached by someone who is an early Blacksky user, Meko Kariki, who was like, what would it take for you to work on this full time? And he gave us our first investment check. And so at that point I incorporated, and we moved from being fiscally hosted from open source collective to being an independent collective. So we still use the Open Collective app as like a clear accounting layer. And then folks who do dev work or moderation work can submit expenses, and our supporters can still kind of subscribe to it. So it's no longer a donation model, but more like a Patreon, like GitHub sponsors, subscriber model for folks. And so that is a big source for us. Folks are giving about like $1,200 a month through that. And then we have also gotten dev grants. So we got a dev grant from Skyseed for $30K. That's what's supporting our work on the relay. I hired a part-time Rust dev who just started a couple weeks ago, Utkarsh Gupta. He's working on that. And then we've gotten a couple other, like it's been basically a mixture of dev grants and kind of early angel checks. But for the longest, it was just community contributions.
What are your thoughts on ultimately how this proceeds into the future in terms of monetization? Are you looking at any kind of monetization scenarios or, things like, for example, how Discord works or advertising or other kinds of models to help subsidize some of the work that's happening?
Yeah, ultimately, everything I want to lean into communities is like at the center of everything. So whether that is supporting other communities in hosting the same kind of infrastructure we have, but configuring it for them, that's something that we're exploring. And then leaning into our own community. So I would like to do things like I really like the Discord server model, like the concept of boosting your server, buying Flare and stuff like that. But maybe that's custom to your server. Without being extractive, it's more like I think the community would find ways to continue to support us and keep everything running. Especially there's so much active like hostility towards ads. We wouldn't go that route. But yeah, finding ways for folks to contribute to and like get something in return, I think that would be really cool. And then, but I think for monetizing wise, helping other communities get set up is very promising right now.
I do really like that model.
And they also contribute in other ways. I'm sure like those folks, maybe they aren't, boosting the server, but they're answering every question coming into the, thing. And so that's also plays into like, wait, I want to be able to reciprocate that support. There's tons of people who are like, I can't support financially right now, but can I do moderation? Can I do this for y'all? Can I make documentation? So, I still want to reward those folks. And so to make them feel as well, like, because it's true, like, it's not just financial compensation that keeps us going. It's all this other stuff that has built up the community too. But yes, monetization is important. The servers do cost money. I always say the revolution ain't free.
How big is your team now?
We have an 8-person volunteer mod team. And then we've had I think we have 7 or 8 contributors on the open source side on the Risky repo. That's the team with air quotes.
Yeah, it was very evident in your Bluesky talk how much you care about your team and how much you value all their contributions. It's a great thing to see.
Yeah, I genuinely, I'm like, it's not even. It is with full sincerity that I'm like, I could not do this if it wasn't for, like, there's folks who've built, like, yes, I built like maybe like the first 100,000 something lines of the risky repo, but there are folks who did like 30,000, and who've really like built out a lot of these features. And I'm just so excited. I'm like, all right. And they're rooting for the project. They're like, some of them are like, yes, please go find funding, because then I'll work on this full time. And so I'm really trying to, I'm so grateful for everyone who has contributed, Natalie, Clinton, Daniel, Utkarsh, everyone who shares our story. There's way too many, but it would not be Blacksky without those folks. I just fought the uphill battle in the first year.
It gives me a lot of hope to see what you and your team and your community have been building collectively together. I hope that a lot of other people learn from the work you're doing, and can incorporate it in, the apps or the back-end services, or if they're building communities on their own. It really is, I think, there's a lot to learn from here. Rudy, I just want to say again, thank you for the work you're doing, for taking time and talking about it here and with me. You really are an inspiration, and it's just been an absolute pleasure to talk about all this.
Very flattering. I very much appreciate the platform and the ability to tell Blacksky's story, because I do think, I do believe in what we're working on. And I do hope that, if folks, I hope folks check out the risky repo, see how you can contribute, check out SafeSkies, see how you can contribute. And then if not, just, get in the dev ecosystem, put something out there, build stuff, write blog posts, tell the different stories, do weird stuff. I hope there are people who just hack on things and, not necessarily chase after, we do have to balance the money with the stuff that we're building. But, at a minimum, I guess, is just keep, like you mentioned, like keep people, like from first principles, like if you're building on the social internet, build pro-social things. There's a bunch of stuff out there now. There's like AI social networks. That's like the complete opposite of like, of what we're trying to do. We're trying more human networks, more human connections. There's so much stuff that people find that like social media is like linked to various problems in our society. And I think there's like, with At Proto, I genuinely do believe we have like tools to build different things, and hopefully get different outcomes as a result of that. So yeah, build something.
And like you said at the beginning, take what you need, share what you can. That is very, very, very cool and very much needed right now.
Well, thanks so much for listening. You can find Rudy on Bluesky at rudyfraser.com. You can find Mike at mmcque.bsky.social. Big thanks to our editors, Rosanna Caban and Anne Lay. If you're interested in the topics covered in this podcast, check out Surf, a new product from Flipboard that lets you surf the social web and create your own custom feeds. Learn more at surf.social. Until next time, we'll see you in the Fediverse.